This cost $60,000. So I built my own for $15,000. And mine is better because I can fix it forever. It's lifetime design. It's also modular, so I can modify it and I can repair any major problem in 1 hour. With the other brand, I have to throw it out in 5 years. But I didn't just build this. I also built this. I calculated that civilization needs just 50 machines to build everything from scratch. And what people can't believe is that I posted the full plans, designs, instructions on how anyone can build these machines for themselves. All of our designs are open source, which means that people from all over the world develop and share this information with everyone else so that anyone can take them and improve on them, well, for the benefit of everyone. You might be wondering what I even use these machines for. Well, we also created a method where you can build an entire house in just 5 days. You might not need a tractor or digger, but everyone needs a home. And almost no one can afford to build their own using current methods which are expensive and inefficient. But with the help of the open source community, we apply the same philosophy we used with machines to housing, and it's already working. Here's a house that we're training people to build in only 5 days for sale right now. Again, all the designs and instructions are posted on our website for free. But if you want a hands-on education in how you can take control of your life, on how you can build a house like this in 6 weeks at a fraction of the cost, and learn skills that will last you a lifetime, our next 2-week crash course is open right now. If you want to learn how to build your own expandable, high-quality starter home in 6 weeks, visit opensourceecology.org, link in the bio.
Peter MacIsaac, my fellow ambassador for Freedom Train International. I always love working with you, Peter. I'm in New Zealand, you're in Canada, and I felt it was just time for us to do a catch-up on Canada, hearing what's going on there. But I thought we'd start with that very positive little clip. Wasn't it wonderful to hear a man say, you only need a certain number of pieces of equipment that can be built by you if you download the free material he's putting out there, and get going. Make yourselves independent. That's what he's saying to the world, and that's the same message you have in your book, Redneck Conservative, Peter, isn't it?
Well, yes, it is, Liz. And by the way, thank you for the invite, because I always appreciate talking to fellow warriors. Even though I think it's 1 o'clock in New Zealand, it's 9:13 on a Saturday night here on the east coast of Canada. Yeah. And most of the folks that I normally hang around with are up to different things this time on a Saturday night. But I find it very important to get this message out. And that gentleman who has that open source data that you're referring to, Liz, one of the things I was fascinated with, matter of fact, I was just talking to my wife about it before we did this show. The fact that you could build a home that would normally cost $400,000 to build for $40,000. And he provides all the open source technology to be able to do it. And that's fully off grid, Liz, where you're no longer under the thumb of an extremely corrupt government.
And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, just talk to people a little bit about your background, about Redneck Conservative, and why they should buy that book as well.
Well, what happened, Liz, is I initially started speaking up after I retired after 29 years working inside our provincial government in the province of Nova Scotia. I was a game warden and a professional forest firefighter for the province for 29 years. And during that time, I was involved in multiple businesses, and I learned inside government that we used to lie to people every day about virtually everything. And 10% of it was outright lies, and 90% of it was by non-disclosure. We would tell you that what would make the government look good. And so I naively decided to get involved with politics for the next 12 years behind the scenes, Liz, thinking that maybe I'd be able to make positive changes. But I learned that the system is broken so badly that it's literally, you cannot fix the system from within in its current state. And then I noticed how badly that I was being censored with my message. And so I started to write a book called The Redneck Conservative, How Conservatives Are Made, even though it's a bestseller on Amazon and you can get it on Audible. The message that's in there with the current legislation that's tabled in Nova Scotia and Canada, that book will probably become illegal and probably be enough to have me jailed if some of the current legislation goes through, Liz. So the idea of a book is no matter what happens, once it's in your hands, they can't take it from you. Digital, they can shut that platform down. But if you get a written copy, everything that I have in that book is highly current, and there's a lot of data in there, and everything. It's highly politically incorrect, but I will tell you that it is correct.
I love that. But it's also about survival in these difficult times, isn't it? It's giving people practical advice.
Yeah, and I think in there I probably refer to another 20 books, and one I'm reading right now is The Creature of Jekyll Island, and it talks about how the bank system was formed, the Federal Reserve in 1913, and how deeply corrupt our banking system is. And when you go right to the head of the snake, Liz, in virtually all circumstances, it takes you back to bankers. And ultimately, a lot of it goes back to the Rothschild family, which will probably get this edition, the fact that I just mentioned that, kicked off any platform that you're on. Just saying.
Well, I was told when we gave politics a go, and I realized too, from within it, when we were campaigning to get in and change New Zealand, only 5 million people, I thought we could really change this country and lead the world with a good example. The corruption is horrendous. But someone in the deep south of the South Island came up and said, I'd like to speak about the Rothschilds. And he'd worked for some of these families. And he said that every country is owned by either Rockefellers or Rothschilds, and New Zealand is a Rothschild country. Be interested to know what Canada is. You don't know, do you? They basically divide up the world.
In 1971, Pierre Elliott Trudeau took our banking system off a government-owned bank and gave it over to a Rothschild banking system, where we used to be able to print our own money at that extremely low interest, and switched it over to a banking system where now we pay high usury fees. And that's why we're crippled by debt. Right now, I'll give you an example, is we pay over $1,000 million every week in interest payments to Rothschild-based banks just to try to keep the country afloat. Imagine $1,000 million every week in interest payments.
And that's not even getting the principal down. That's just treading water. That is shocking.
Yeah.
1,000 million a week.
Yeah, so people forget how much 1,000 million is, and to put it in perspective, that's $1 billion. But people throw $1 billion around right now. But you can, if you spend $1 a second, it takes you 11 days to spend $1 million. It takes you 33 years to spend $1 billion. To put it in perspective, right? If you're spending $1 per second.
I mean, Peter, your country is one of the worst, but I can't really single it out much beyond the United Kingdom or much beyond Australia, where there's a terrible woman, and they call her Karen, an American woman who is trying to put the muzzle on Australians and their wonderful outspoken tendencies with their raw language, and trying to say, no, you won't speak out. But Canada, in a way, was the first one where the horrors were truly signaled by the son of that Trudeau man. I call him Turdo. He's just appalling, your last Prime Minister. He and Jacinda Ardern were the true evil twins of the COVID lockdown, weren't they?
Yeah, and what happened here when he got in power in 2015 under very shady circumstances, that began the major demise of what we see now in Canada. We had mass immigration, Liz, to the point that our biggest city in Nova Scotia is Halifax, and I don't recognize Halifax anymore. I can go into a store and think I'm living in Mumbai, India. It's the demographic has changed so dramatically here in Canada in the last 10 years that it's incomprehensible, to tell you the truth. And right now in Nova Scotia, for example, we have the worst GDP of any province or state in either the US or Canada combined. And we only have 1.1 million people, and we're just going to have a deficit of 1.2 billion. And our premier is an accountant, and I'm involved in two Supreme Court cases for him violating our Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And he couldn't care less about our Charter of Rights and Freedoms. He understands the system. He just does what he wants, knowing that irregardless of what he does, it'll be tied up in court for several years, and he can trample the rights of Canadians nonstop. And the federal government under Trudeau perfected that. And the new bankster that they installed to become our new prime minister, Mark Carney, not only is he an expert at it, he was the puppet master behind Justin Trudeau running Canada's finances since 2020. He was the guy who ran our deficits and ran our economy into the ground. And then he was installed by the banksters to make sure that the digital ID and CIBCs get implemented here in Canada. And prior to that,
I think you mean the CBDCs, the central bank digital currency. It's hard to remember all those anagrams, but he was also in London. He was in the city of London. He's a globalist through and through, Mark Carney, isn't he?
Yes, and he actually was in charge of one of the climate wings for the WEF, and he's actually the go-to guy for collapsing companies for BlackRock. So when a company goes into insolvency, Mark Carney was the guy they would send in to clean up the mess. I'll give you an example, Liz. In the last election, before he was elected to power, behind the scenes, he was the guy whispering in the ear of our finance minister. And her name was, God, I'm trying to think of her name right now. But she was a student of George Soros. And Mark Carney, she was our finance minister, and Canada was projected to have a $40 billion deficit in 2025. Mark Carney was telling her how to run our finances, and she went 20 billion over and was projecting 60 billion. So she got fired for that. And now we have Mark Carney, who's projecting a $100 billion deficit in 2025, and he still hasn't tabled a budget, and he's been in power now for 6 months. It's so outrageous with the money that they're spending with no approval, no debate, no anything, Liz, that it's last Friday, the government bureaucrat inside our government whose job is to hold the government account and be the whistleblower, technically, that says, look, we have problems. He came out last Friday, and he said that if the deficit proceeds at the current rate it's projected, that Canada cannot financially survive what Carney has planned here in the next couple of months. Said that he said it will end the country. It is stupefying, preposterous, and outrageous. I think those were some of the terms and he works for the government. He's one of the guys they pay big money to try to say good things about the government. So Carney is the worst of the absolute worst. He's the very bottom of the barrel, the scum that actually floats on ponds around the world. When people point to pond scum, they're pointing to Mark Carney.
I'd put Starmer there with him. I'd say Albanese in Australia with him. And actually Luxon is in New Zealand is a smiling assassin, but doing the same. They are all betraying. There are so many points I want to unpack there. Just want to move back to your premier in your area. And it's funny that you forgot that woman. I know exactly the woman you mean. I've also forgotten
Chrystia Freeland.
Chrystia Freeland. But you know why it's funny, Peter? Because they all think it's about their power and their control and their money. And they need to know this. They are all absolutely forgettable people. They're not people who will be ever remembered with anything other than a shudder, like Justin Trudeau, all of them. These globalists, like Ardern here, she can't even come back to New Zealand because she knows actually how hated she is here. So these are forgettable, criminal people who are part of a criminal cabal. But let's just move back to your premier. What's his name in Nova Scotia?
Jim Houston.
That's right. And then it was interesting you said about India. I wanted to unpack that because Luxon here, our Prime Minister, has just gone to India in the last few months and has said, open slather on New Zealand. Any Indians can come in here and we're going to make it easy and apparently they are just racing into this country. So how many do you think you were getting in at the peak of the madness when Trudeau was letting as many as possible in? How many
we had a country originally when this started in 2015, Liz, we had around 31 million. Now I think we're up to 42 million. So in the last 10 years, we've increased our population by over 25%. And the bulk of those people have not come from Denmark and Norway and Sweden. The bulk of them have come from the Middle East initially, and now from India. And what happened when the folks coming here from the Middle East that practice Islam, they turned on the federal government when the federal government started teaching sexualizing little kids in school and pushing a gay agenda on them, the LGBTQ. So about 3 years ago, the Islamic community that was being brought into Canada did an about face and said, no, we will not tolerate this. And so what happened is the government did an about face and said, well, folks from India, they'll tolerate this. And so they started to flood our province here in particular. And there's areas in Canada, in central Canada and out on the west coast, that the complete demographic has shifted, Liz. It's unbelievable. And not only that, it's a lot of the folks when they come in, they get perks and things that, my wife and I are retired. They get a lot of perks and things that I spent my whole life working here in Canada, and I don't have access to what immigrants come when they get here. Right here in our province of 1 million people, we still have 140,000 people without a doctor. If you come here from India, you're appointed a doctor day one.
I think it's not racist to say to people, because one of my best friends is an Indian New Zealander who's fully integrated with the Kiwi way of life. But it's saying to Kiwis or saying to Canadians, these people will come in such vast numbers, they will never integrate. They will actually flood, and they will take over, and they will turn the Canadian way of life Indian, or here in New Zealand, it's going to go the same way. And there is no discussion about this. So you're a bit ahead of us in Canada on that. What does it look like? Are there sort of, Indian shops popping up? Does it have a very different feeling, but in a way that's not integrational, but very much the deluge?
Yeah, it's 100% what you're seeing in your country and what they're seeing in the UK, Liz. It's there's zero assimilation. I'm old enough to remember we had a big influx of Vietnamese in probably the 90s, I believe it was, here in Canada. And what happened is nobody moved into areas in mass numbers. So you were forced to integrate. If you moved into a community, you didn't speak Vietnamese, you had to learn to speak English. And then you had to adapt and adopt the culture in the local community that you moved into to survive. But that's not what's happening now. We're being flooded with such numbers from immigrants that are basically coming from the same countries that they form enclaves, and they have zero reason to integrate. I'll give you an example. In Ontario right now, you can take your driver's license in over 32 different languages. Wow. Meanwhile, all the signage in Canada is only in 2 languages, English and French. Right now, here in Halifax, there's probably not a day goes by on the major routes, the major traffic routes, that somebody's in an accident. And I'm not being racist here. I'm just stating facts. The bulk of the people in the accidents are new immigrants that are very poor at driving. And, people have been, there's just so many things, Liz. I grew up in rural Nova Scotia, and I talk about it in my book. Like I said, I grew up I was a good old boy living in the country. And I never in my life believed I'd see what has happened here. We've got a premier who wants to double our population here, over the next couple of years. We've got a program in Canada. It's called Operation 100, but they have a target to try to by 2050 to increase our population now from 41 million to 100 million. And none of those people are coming from white European countries. The idea is to completely change the demographic, and it's working. And so what they do is when they put people in enclaves, when they bring people in and they line their pockets and they give them free cell phones and $800 down winter jackets, and they give them housing and financing for vehicles, and then they give them jobs and they give them all this other stuff, is that they feel obligated to vote Liberal. And so what happens, Liz, is if you break down the demographic in Canada, you'll see a lot of immigrants are moving into areas that used to be swing ridings in federal elections. So if that way you never knew whether it was going to swing to a conservative, to the left, or to the right. And so now what they're doing is overloading those critical areas with enough immigrants that feel obligated to support the federal Liberal Party, that now you can count on those areas from this point forward being a Liberal stronghold.
This is a riding is, I think, your name for an electorate. That's what we call it.
That's right.
This is exactly what's happening in Australia under Albanese. Albanese, who is one of the most hated prime ministers ever in Australia's history, is intimating that there'll never be anything other than an Australian Labor government, because they are loading it up with migrants who they think will vote for them. So, Peter, let's cut here to this is why it's so interesting talking to you, because for a long time now, you've had the fully integrated details of what's going on in Canada, but you've also got the 30,000-foot view. For people who are saying, yes, but Peter, we have to be tolerant. We have to bring in people from other countries who are needing our help. We must be kind and open-armed. Tell people what they're missing. Tell people what the real agenda here is, because you know it. I know it.
Yeah, so what Canada's doing is committing social suicide, Liz, right? Because Canada was founded as a Christian nation. And basically, when I grew up in school, there was still the 10 Commandments on the wall, and there was things that we did. All that's gone now. And all of the things that, I'm in my mid-60s, and all of that stuff that I grew up with is now gone. It's not here anymore. And so what you're looking at, when people don't integrate, instead of having a Canadian culture, now what we have is a series of enclave cultures. And, here in Halifax, for example, or out in BC, Chinese is spoken a lot more often than French, even though French and Canadian are our two only official languages. There's more people in Canada right now that probably speak Chinese than there are that speak French.
So tell people why the government would do this. Why would a white man, Justin Trudeau, betray other white Canadians? Why would he want to do this? What's driving him and Starmer and Albanese and Luxon in New Zealand? What's their motivation?
Well, some of these people are psychopaths. They have zero conscience for what they do, Liz. And they can be swayed by money and bribery. And I think a lot of people get swayed by blackmail. If you look at Starmer's past, I just read a document yesterday where when Jimmy Savile in the UK was being accused of molesting over 400 children, the Crown prosecutor who refused to prosecute Jimmy Savile was Herr Starmer.
Oh,
I just watched the whole thing on it yesterday.
Wow.
Right. So the question is what do the people in charge, the people who excel at blackmail, have on Keir Starmer? Now, there would be plenty to have on Justin Trudeau, right? Because Justin Trudeau, the information that I have is here in Canada, and I'm only saying what other people are saying. Well, he was in the closet for a long time, and it was one of the reasons why his wife left him, and he didn't want to come out as the first openly gay prime minister. But I've seen him do interviews that said, that would be great one day that for Canada to find out they had a gay prime minister and had kept it from the population. So what happens was a lot of things that he wanted to be able to do. Justin Trudeau couldn't come out of the closet because he needed the support of the Muslim voters in Canada, in the main areas in central Ontario. And if he would have come out of the closet, he would have lost that support, because an imam can't stand up in a mosque and say, go vote for somebody who's openly gay. Most people don't know that.
No, I didn't know that. That.
So what happens, that's why you get people that can be easily blackmailed, and then they have to do what they're told while they're in power, and they can be bribed. I mean, when Justin Trudeau went in power, he was worth, I think, about $20 million in their trust, and when he left, he was worth over $300 million. So how's that happen on a salary of a couple of $100,000 a year? Well, it doesn't. But the reality is once Islam turned against him, at that point, that's why he was in every gay parade and all the things that he was involved in. He couldn't come openly out and declare, here's what I am. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I'm saying if you want to do that stuff behind closed doors, that's your business. But if you do that in politics, you cannot, the Muslim community cannot support you. And that's when things shifted to bringing in the bulk of people from India, from the Middle East. Even though I think we took in something like 6,000 people from Gaza, when all their own Islamic neighbors wouldn't bring in, they won't bring in not one person from Gaza. So you have to ask yourself, what do all the neighbors, the Arab neighbors, the Islamic Brotherhood around Gaza, what do they know about the Hamas and the thought process in Gaza? The Canada obviously does know, because we're bringing in 6,000 people, In Canada right now, Liz, when they bring people in, they don't go through a proper security check of any kind. You can come in here and be a serial killer, and they'll still let you into Canada.
And again, that's happening in Australia and it's happening in New Zealand. So the bigger picture, though, is all of these leaders answer to the World Economic Forum and the United Nations. And that leads us right back to Agenda 2030. They want, that debt, weekly interest payments of 1,000 million in Canada is going to bring your country financially to its knees very, very
Correct.
quickly. They want all of us broken. They want the Western democratic, formerly democratic countries broken financially, societally, divided, at each other's throats, not trusting one another. This is the playbook of communists, isn't it? Ultimately, these people serve a sort of communist Marxist agenda to bring the world to its knees so that digital ID and CBDCs can be rolled out so there can be full control of us, of the people, of our children and their children in the same style, really, as China. If you look at China, it's horrifying, Peter.
So fear works. And the Tavistock Institute, who specialized after World War I in how to mass control millions of people using fear, every single play in the playbook was used during COVID. And they were shocked at how easy it was, how simple it was to get people to line up like sheep and wear masks and stand behind plastic and 6 feet apart and travel in the right direction in a store and stuff. And anybody who could think critically at all was just looking at this. They were just baffled. Like, how did so many people roll over so easy? So it happens, Liz, because they're afraid. And here in Canada right now, as I'm watching what Carney's doing, and it's a strategic economic collapse of Canada so that people are so tied up and fearful about how they're going to pay their bills. Right, the average person now has got to have a husband and a wife working in Canada, and one of them have 2 jobs just in order to be able to raise a family of any kind. So when you don't have time to think critically and do research like you and I have, then all you get to listen to is 100% manipulated and paid for mainstream media, and the fear mongering. That's pounded in your brain if you listen to the radio over and over, every hour on the hour here in Canada. All you hear is fear, climate change, one thing or another. So what happens, Liz, is when people are afraid, we talked about this before, they can't think critically. And when you can't think critically and the government says, look, we can't pay our bills anymore, the country's on the verge of bankruptcy, we have to have a digital ID in order to save the country. And the only way to do that is we're going to have to bring in a central bank digital currency, and we're going to have to go off cash because cash allows an underground economy, and we're losing billions and billions in lost tax revenue because of an underground economy. And the only time an underground economy thrives is when you're being taxed into oblivion. And that's what's happening in Canada right now. People can't afford to live. Our underground economy here in Canada now is massive.
And just say a little bit more about that. What is going on with the underground? Do you mean people going directly to farmers, getting food directly from farmers, bartering with each other? How would you articulate that?
Well, that would be as everybody working for as much cash as they can on the side, Liz. Barter. Just if there's any way you can make money on the side that you don't have to report to the government, you do it. It's that simple, because if you don't, I don't know how people can afford to live. I'll give you an example. I'm living here where we live in Nova Scotia. The cost of groceries has virtually doubled since 2019. That's in the last 6 years. And I can guarantee you nobody's wages here have doubled. The house that I live in right now in 2019, the price of this house has more than doubled. The price of our house now has probably gone up 140% since 2019.
That's unsustainable. It's completely unsustainable for life. When you talk to other Canadians, Peter, what are you picking up? Because Canadians, like New Zealanders, can appear a little bit sheepish. I don't mean to insult, but honestly, they can seem polite to the point of going along with something they should have absolutely said, well, the Australian vernacular is, nah, bugger off, mate. The Australians will stand up and they'll push back much more than New Zealanders. And I think Canadians are a bit compliant like New Zealanders too. But behind the scenes, I feel like a lot of New Zealanders do know what's going on. Are Canadians a bit the same? They're not yet speaking out in vast numbers?
Well, what happens is here in Canada, Liz, because we don't have a First Amendment like in the US, we don't have free speech and we don't have the right to bear arms. We have estimated over 60 million firearms in Canada, and the government just finished banning another 330. Right now, since 2021, Liz, our government has banned over 2,000 different types of firearms. And they're even taking little 22 rimfires. They're basically trying to take every gun they can. And throughout history, governments have only taken all your guns for one reason. And that's because they plan to do something they don't want you to have guns to stop them from doing. Right? I'm like I said, I was a game warden. I dealt with more armed people over my career in one fall than most police officers do over their entire life. I literally dealt with thousands and thousands of armed people. Like every fall, we deal with every year I deal with at least 1,000 armed people in the woods.
And when you say deal with, what? You're meeting them, you're checking their licenses. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I'd be checking their licenses, or they'd be involved in breaking some legislation, and you'd be involved in tracking them down and arresting people and taking them to court and all these other different types of things you had to do. And while we were doing that, Liz, we ran into basically everything, drug dealers, we ran into everything.
Yes.
And we used to work with multiple different departments. But the amount of people that I dealt with firearms was crazy. And none of the firearms that they're taking, for example, we had a mass shooting in an area that I used to patrol in. It was called a Portapic massacre. I think 22 people were killed. And the firearms that were used, not one of them, 3 days after that happened, the government banned 1,500 types of firearms. Not one of those firearms had been used in this mass shooting. Not one.
That makes absolutely no sense. So what's going on there?
Well, it makes sense if you're trying to disarm the public. So in every country, when you go back through history and you look at what happens to societies that become unarmed, what happens to them? It's the same thing in World War II. The Japanese wouldn't invade the United States because I'll give you an example. In 3 states alone in the U.S., there's more deer hunters with high-powered rifles that probably qualify as snipers than there is on any standing army in the world. There's over, I think, 1.2 million hunters in just 3 states in the U.S. that are armed and know what to do with firearms. So rather than just a trained army, you can't invade a country like that because they have an untrained army that will stand up for themselves. And here in Canada, that used to be the same thing. And so what they're doing is they're banning another 2,000 firearms, and those firearms, none of them are used in all the crime that we're seeing in the central cities, which is all gang violence. And rather than focus on gang violence, they're going after duck hunters in Labrador, Newfoundland, and some guy who likes to hunt rabbits in Nova Scotia or out in Alberta. It's insane.
I keep saying it. Same thing in New Zealand. The minute we had the mosque shootings, which put Jacinda Ardern on the world map, and there are a lot of question marks over that. We were not even allowed to discuss it. The minute she could, she took in all the guns she could from New Zealanders. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, isn't it? The Founding Fathers knew this. That's why they had that amendment. They knew that the government should always be scared of the people. The people should never be scared of their government. And for the government to be scared of the people need to be armed. And the Founding Fathers knew that one generation governments could go seriously rogue, which is what we've got now. So what's happening with Canada? Is there a pushback? Are there people saying, no, you don't have a right to take my gun. I don't trust you. You haven't acted in a trustworthy way. Or are they submitting?
So what happened here with this new legislation? The government wants to spend $750 million on a firearm buyback program, and they're saying it's completely up to the gun owner to turn the firearm in, and they'll give you what the gun was worth in 2020. But they're saying that it's not a requirement. But after 12 months, if you don't do it, you automatically become a criminal.
Oh,
right. So that's the way they're wording it. So what happened is they couldn't find any of the police forces across Canada willing to participate in gathering up these firearms. Until recently, down here in Nova Scotia, of all places, they found one police chief in Sydney Cape Breton Island, whose brother is a federal MP in our parliament federally, and or brother-in-law, I believe. And they took some extra funding and they want to start gathering up these firearms. But I will have to give the local folks down there credit because there's been mass opposition to saying, no, we're not doing it. And you guys had a lot more problems to deal with the drug problems and the things that the government. See, here in Canada, I mean, you can go, for example, in BC to a vending machine outside a hospital and get opioids and cocaine and things that you need from a vending machine. Like, I mean, what's happening here in Canada is insane. Just so that your viewers understand, Liz, there's so many deaths from drugs now that one of the reasons that Trump brought in his restrictions on trade to Canada was the amount of opiates that are pouring across the Canadian border down into the U.S. that are killing tens and thousands of people down there. And right now, the Chinese influence here in Canada is staggering. And I mean, it's hard to conceive of how big a drug trade has moved into Canada to take advantage of our lax laws that are, instead of all the drugs pouring from Mexico up into the U.S., they now pour into the U.S. from Canada. It's staggering what's happening here, Liz.
And they come into Canada, many of them from China. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, well, we get a lot of like the basic components and they come in. And I'll give you an example here in Canada. Our border patrol is so lax that there's only 1 in 100 containers get searched coming through our ports. 1 in 100, Liz. So the odds of getting caught are pretty slim.
We could be in the same country, Peter. Honestly, we've just had a massive methamphetamine haul that has been picked up. But for that, you do wonder how many other massive hauls coming into New Zealand. And again, what does it root back to? Break the people of the country. Break them through drugs. Break them through their businesses going bankrupt. Break them through health mandates for supposed health that have made so many New Zealanders limping and sick and repeatedly sick. You listen to most New Zealanders and they talk about, oh yeah, I've had one cold after another this winter. It's not normal. Most parents now of small children go, oh yeah, my kids are always sick with colds. That's because the parents have been jabbed. That's because there's poison in the jabs. Are you getting the same on that as well?
Yeah, I'm up to 69 dead friends now since COVID started. 69 dead. And none of them filled out a VAERS report. Nobody would take the time to do VAERS reports. Out of those 69, I'm willing to bet that at least of those folks that died, at least 60 of them were vaccine injured seriously. I've got friends right now. You know, I've got one friend, he's on his bout of third different cancer. His wife has just been diagnosed with cancer. She's had shingles twice. Once your immune system's been destroyed, Liz, that's what you have to contend with. I'll give you an example here in Canada too. You probably already know these numbers, but we're the world's #1 provider of medical assistance in dying, a program that's called MAID. And we've had more people killed in Canada by the government through the MAID program, excuse me, than all the U.S. soldiers killed in Vietnam.
That is so sad. Is it true, the rumor that they are even encouraging young people who are depressed, who feel lost, for whom there aren't jobs, who just are needing society to gather around them and support them and guide them? They're being told, look, if you want to end your life early, that's okay. Or is that hyperbole? Is that exaggeration, Peter?
No, that's not hyperbole. The government's actually trying to put legislation in place that will allow, I think, kids as young as 14 to be able to ask to be mated. And if the school knows about it, they're not going to be allowed to tell the parents.
What? To be euthanized, to be put to sleep, in effect.
Yeah. Yeah, they're saying now, you know, I'm looking here in Canada right now where people are doing everything they can inside the Liberal Party to allow 16-year-olds, Liz, to be able to vote. So in Canada, you're not allowed to smoke cigarettes till you have to be over 18, and you have to be over 18 to drink. But it's okay here, apparently in Nova Scotia, to give informed consent to take vaccines when you're 12. And ask for MAID. The federal government wants to set it up so you can ask for MAID when you're 14.
This is utter insanity.
Yeah, so everything is upside down. So what happens is okay, so there's people like me and you that are willing to speak up. I'm willing to die for what I believe in, right? They're not, nobody's shutting me up. And if they come to haul me in jail, they better send quite a few. So the issue is that they're changing legislation now in Canada. So the conversation we're having right now, probably you might be able to get up to 20 years in jail. Because if this is deemed to promote hate against anybody, and the definition of hate is not specific. In Canada, under our criminal law system, we have a dictionary called Black's Law Dictionary. And all things in law you have to go back to the definition, and there is no clear definition of what hate speech is in Canada. Everything is based on case law, but no clear definition. And so there's a couple of bills being put in place right now. There's one the federal government is trying to put in place right now, Bill C8, Liz, that if I say something that hurts your feelings, I can actually end up with a life sentence. And at the same time, we have legislation that the federal government is trying to put in so that at a ministerial level, without a warrant or without any reason, they can make a determination that we don't like what you're saying. It could hurt the general message somehow. For example, if they're saying, you need a new vaccine, people are starting asking questions, that not only are they going to be able to just turn you off a platform, the minister is going to be able to order providers that you can't be allowed on the internet. I don't mean just on Facebook or Google. I mean the entire internet. No banking, no anything, Liz. And they're trying to push that piece of legislation through as we speak right now.
That is China. That's what they do in China. The
exact
person,
same thing.
Yep. The person who stands up and questions is then ostracized completely from society. And hate speech has a definition. Do you know what it is? It's hate speech is speech they hate, and they being the globalists. That's what it is. But you know what? The country. What if the people pushed back and said, "You've hurt my feelings by calling my speech hate speech, so now you're up for it." And say that back to the safety, the e-safety commissioner in Australia. You're hurting my feelings. So now you should be charged under the same legislation you're using. I mean, I make that point because it's so ludicrous what they're doing. We can never have this. We must be able to openly discuss what our governments are doing. But here's the rub, Peter. What is the solution? Because we are literally in a free fall now in all these corrupted countries. The social contract whereby we gave our trust to those supposedly in charge, supposedly voted in. I don't believe Carney got a huge vote. I believe a lot of people, I think there was a setup in Australia, there was a setup in New Zealand, in the UK for sure, and in Canada. But supposedly these people voted in. There was a social contract where we said, we'll put our trust in you. You will have the privilege of a position of some power, temporary power, and money, and you will serve us. But that's all been broken now. They are absolutely exploiting the last of any trust that's there. God knows who would still trust these people. But they are going actively to hurt and silence and bully and coerce and manipulate the people of the world into Agenda 2030 on behalf of the UN and the World Economic Forum. So the social contract is broken. What's the answer, Peter?
Education is the only answer, Liz, because if you're not educated and you don't have facts to deal with, you are going to end up being afraid. And as soon as you're afraid, you lose your ability to think critically. And once you've lost that ability, as a matter of fact, it actually gives you a physiological change. Fear actually causes less blood flow to your prefrontal cortex, this part of your brain. That's the part of your brain that controls critical thinking. When you're in a fear reaction, blood doesn't go to that area very well. That's why in the military and that, for example, you're trained to do a lot of things based on muscle memory, not on thought. So that when you get in a fear situation, you revert back to your training. But what happens is the powers that be in the Tavistock Institute and the people that are controlling us know that once you're afraid, you don't have that training. You don't know how to respond. And then you go to, okay, I'm looking to anybody who's going to help me. And it's always the government say, well, follow us, we'll help you. And because I was inside government for 29 years, I'm here to tell you that we lied to you every day. people look at me, well, that can't be. Well, go read my book and read all the examples. If I can tell you in there, lie after lie after lie after lie. And it's like when you tell your kids stuff that you can't give them full disclosure, Liz, right? When your kids say, gee, mommy and daddy, where do babies come from? Well, daddy likes mommy and this stuff. Well, when they're 8 years old, you can't really give them the whole deal. But the reality of it is that's what the government does to you every day. They lie to you every day by not giving you full disclosure. Because if you knew the real truth on mostly what they're doing, you would be at their door with torches and pitchforks like in the old days. They'd be in France, they'd be setting up the guillotine. There'd be politicians hanging from every tree on every road going into every city in North America. If people really knew what politicians are doing to them behind the scenes and to their money. And because I was involved in that system and know how bad it is, the only way to overcome it is you have to be able to get people to start asking questions, but you can't give them a truckload of information all at once because most people's brains just aren't ready to get it. So what I've learned to do, Liz, and I talked to a bunch of psychologists. One of the guys, I just watched another thing from yesterday, Jason Christoff, and I think you're probably interested. Have you interviewed Jason?
I'd love to. We've had him on Freedom Train International, and he's a terrific mind. He's a really strong intellect. Yeah,
I'll help set something up with you there, Liz, that you can interview him. But the thing about it is, as he points out, you have to ask people open-ended questions. Like I can tell you all kinds of things, and you're going to go, "Who's that smart ass think he is? He doesn't have all the answers." Well, all you can do is ask open-ended questions, and ask people questions and things that they will know for themselves. It's nonsense. It's like standing on those dots in a store 6 feet apart from one another, or walking into a restaurant where you had to wear a mask to walk in, and as soon as you sat down, you took your mask off.
Yes.
You were on a high chair. Your face was at the same level of the person who was waiting at you, and she's got the mask on and you don't. And you're looking at that and go, so does that make sense to you? And they're going, well, and so you can see them. What you need to do is ask people questions that they think about when they walk away from you. And they go, what he was saying kind of makes sense. And once you start asking questions, it's almost like one day it'll hit you in the face like a fry pan. One of the guys I work here with, I'm the president of what's called the Independent Nova Scotia Initiative. And an engineer who I worked with on that board, he was a medical device engineer. And when COVID was coming on, the province was saying that 12-year-olds could give informed consent. And he used to write informed consent documents for things that he had invented. And he pulled over on the side of the road and started hitting his dash and going, well, this is just a lie. If they're lying about this, what else are they lying about? And now he's one of the strongest advocates, like yourself and I, on what's the truth, because he started asking questions and the answers didn't make sense. And that's what people need to start doing and say, okay, does it make sense to not have cash? Do you trust the bank to be able to manage all your money? Because here's the number one question, Liz. Here in Canada, every single system that the federal government has had in place has been hacked into at one time or another.
Yes.
Every single system. And then with quantum computing and AI, there's a new program that I believe Google has called Willow. And Willow can crack any security, irregardless of what it is and what agency has it in place. Security combinations they thought would take millions of years to crack. Willow can crack anything in less than 4 minutes, including, by the way, all cryptocurrency.
Which is horrendous for people who might have potentially billions or millions from Bitcoin, to think that they've got it locked in a digital wallet. And as AI develops at this rapid pace, it could be cracked open easily. That's quite a salutary thought.
And when you talk to the top people in the industry, they tell you that they've already lost control of AI already. Like I listened to a guy from Canada. He was called the godfather of AI here just yesterday. And he was doing an interview. He says, I think it's already lost. And we're going to be at what they call super intelligence way sooner than they thought it was going to be here. So if you've got anything digital and the government says you need all your data. So, for example, I was told yesterday that if I wanted to fly into Europe tomorrow, I have to give facial recognition and a fingerprint data to be able to fly into Europe now. They're not getting that out of me. I just won't be going. the reality of is that data is going to be hacked and stolen. And once that data is stacked at home and you have my fingerprints and you've got my facial recognition, you can pretend you're me anywhere at any time. So anybody that gives in to digital ID, quite simply, you're an idiot.
Let's do that. Let's take some critical thinking examples a little bit deeper. Has anybody thought about, if you give in to the government's digital ID demands, where the data on you and your children, your spouse, all of your life, your bank accounts, every detail of your medical history, where does that data all end up? Do you think it could end up in Canada? And do you think it could end up in China? I mean,
end up anywhere.
Absolutely, it could end up anywhere. Now, here's another one, Peter. If my records to my home, I rent, but if I owned a home, if my records to my home ownership are as part of my digital fingerprint online, and somebody hacks in and manages through fraud to take those papers, that ownership of my house, where have I got redress? Who do I talk to then? It looks as if the fine print in some of these digital ID agreements that are going to be forced on us say that the government is absolved of any responsibility if somebody basically steals it. So who do you go to? There is nobody you can go to get that ownership of your house potentially put right. That's a horrific thought, isn't it? What other aspects of it have you thought about, Peter? The risks of digital ID.
Well, on top of digital ID, do you remember that there used to be something called 23andMe where you could put in some saliva and they'd give you all your history?
Yeah.
So everybody thought when they signed on to 23andMe that data would remain confidential with that company. That company was sold. That data has been sold all over the world now. If you gave your genome, your genetic information to 23andMe, you have no idea who has it now. You have no idea what they're doing. Some madman in a lab could be sitting there going, gee, based on this genetic characteristic, we should be able to wipe out this lineage of people. Because there's no safeguards anymore, Liz. Once you give the government anything that's digital where they can completely control you, here in Canada, I mean, the pay systems have been broken into. Every single system the government has put in place, the security's been cracked and it's been hacked. Even Canada Revenue Agency, I still can't log in because my income tax data was cracked into 6 years ago, and I have to go in through a banking portal now to be able to get in because they've never been able to give me back access through Canada Revenue Agency. That's how bad they screwed it up. So I guess here's a question for people. Do you believe that the people you know in government can do a better job of looking after things than people in the private sector? And if you believe that, you need to do some more research because everything they touch turns to crap. All of it. Yes. Everything I've ever seen. There's nothing that the government can do better than somebody in the private sector can do. And so one of the things they can't do is they cannot secure your data, Liz. It's an impossibility. So if you allow them to do that, and let's say they take you off cash. So right now, if me and you go out and decide to buy something and pay cash for it, it's nobody's business but me and you what I just bought. But when a central bank digital currency comes in, irregardless of what you do, how small it is, I don't care if it's $1, everything you do going forward for the rest of your life, the government knows exactly what you've done. They can chalk it down to your carbon footprint. Here in Canada, they've already proved that they'll illegally shut off your bank accounts. And that's when it was illegal. What do you think they're going to do when it's legal and they have control of your accounts? They'll just shut you off. And I have people saying, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. And I'm going, well, who determines what's wrong? You may have said something in a public forum one day and disagreed with somebody in the government. And they'll go, yeah, that Liz gun needs to be shut down. And here in Canada, they don't even have to justify it, Liz, what they're saying with this new legislation. So they're putting all this legislation in place, piece by piece, right? Death by 1,000 cuts. So that finally, when they drop a digital ID on you and a central bank digital currency, you're going to have no way left to fight back. So you absolutely, positively, no matter what you do, if you care about your family, your loved ones, your children, you have to stand up against a digital ID and digital currency. And what they're doing right now is in the process of crashing the economy to the point where people are going to go, well, I have to feed my kids. I have to do something. What am I going to do? And they'll say, well, we'll eliminate some of your debt, but you have to go over to central bank digital currency. And from that point on, you become a prisoner.
And even more so if they say, oh, look, we're such a kind government, we'll put you on a universal basic income, which they say during the lockdowns, they were testing how little humans were willing to live on. So they had these government handouts of minimal money while we were all locked up in our homes. Somebody said to me that was a primary test to see what how degraded humans would be willing to be and how little they'd be willing to live on. Now, if they give you an income because there aren't the jobs, because AI has taken over, you become even more dependent on the government. They have even more control. But here's the rub, Peter. Why is the digital ID the line that must not be crossed? It's that more than anything else that leads on to every other control, isn't it?
Yeah. So as soon as they have that, they have it all. That's the key to your freedom. And once you give that up, then they can access and track everything you do from that point on, Liz. And so what people need to understand is if you're going to fight for anything in your lifetime, do not allow your government to force a digital ID on. And they're not going to force it. They'll say, well, it'll be the same as they did with the vaccine. You know, it's not mandatory, but if you'd like to eat, right? Or if you'd like to be able to put gas in your car, or if you'd like to be able to do any of these, you have to have it. But if you can find a way to not do any of those things, well, you won't have to have it. And they're going to say it's not really mandatory. Anyways, it's a band of outlaws that are determined to take control of society. And here's the crazy thing about it, Liz. Even with digital ID, they couldn't make it as effective as they wanted to be without AI. But now that they have AI, not only will they be able to track what you're doing, they'll be able to, through predictive modeling, be able to know every single thing that you're going to do. They'll be able to say, well, if we upset him with this, he'll do this. And they'll be able to completely control, based on Tavistock Institute things that they've discovered how to control human psychology. They'll be able to take AI with your digital ID, knowing that you have X amount of money, because they'll know everything about you. And they'll be able to pattern you and you'll only see the information they want you to see, and they will have full and complete control over you. And I know this sounds kind of tinfoil hatty, but the reality of it is I did law enforcement for 29 years. All I look at is evidence. And the evidence is overwhelming. If you allow these people to do this, you're screwed.
And if you think it sounds ludicrous, just look at China right now. They have people having to line up, sitting on seats in the snow with masks on, supposedly for their health, to have the COVID test still. And these people will not get any of their allowance for their social credit scores if they don't do exactly what the government wants. So it is happening already. So, Peter, what's the pushback? It may be in the short term that we really have to be willing to go without. We may not be able to travel far in our cars. We won't be able to travel on flights to Europe. As you say, we may have to reach out to farmers that we know, or collect seeds and start to grow our own food. Make sure that we've stocked up on brown rice and lentils, if it's that. We have to just be willing to live very simply, very quietly, and very firmly say no, but we may have to be willing to go without as warfare demands. Is that the answer?
Well, basically, it is warfare, Liz. And so people have to realize the war's already begun. It's not a war, though, with bullets. Even though in Canada, like I say, they're taking over 2,000 firearms, because they know there's enough of us rednecks still out there, right? That now I'm a peace-loving man, Liz. Right? I don't own guns. And the only knife I have is a butter knife, right? But I'm a very highly trained person with a very specific skill set. And Canada is full of thousands and thousands of people like that who will not tolerate full-on communism coming to the shores of Canada. And so what they're trying to do is make it impossible for those people to communicate with one another, get organized, do what they need to do. But the reality of it is, and we talk about this on Freedom Train International, you have to get educated so you're not afraid. Once you're not afraid, you can think critically. Once you can think critically, then you can start to prepare for whatever you think may be coming. And that means that you have to have a supply of different things, but you have to ask yourself this: if the power went out today for the next 30 days, how would you survive? if the government for some reason shut down access to your bank account for the next 30 days, what are you going to do? Do you have an extra 2 5-gallon cans of petrol or gas that for your vehicle? At nighttime, do you keep your vehicles full of gas? Do you have enough food for an extra 30 days in your house? What do you have? And then the other issue is you can't just sit back and just take it. You have to speak up. And, it might not even be in a crowded situation, but if you're at breakfast with a couple of your lady friends, Liz, and they start talking nonsense and it's nonsense, you may lose some friends, but you're going to have to start challenging people and say, well, guys, are you aware of this? And they're going to look at you and they, a lot of times they're going to say, man, what are you talking about? And I have people say, well, where do you get your information? And I know they're only getting their information in Canada from mainstream bribed media. And I have to give the Liberal government credit. When they bribed mainstream media, it was one of the smartest political moves they ever made. Because you can see it. Once you know what you're looking at, you can't not see it anymore, Liz. Once you get yourself educated to the point where you understand the difference between lies and you understand propaganda, and then you understand real news, then right off the bat, my wife and I, even when my wife was working full time, she had a problem differentiating between propaganda and news. And now that she's retired and has more time, she's changed dramatically. She goes, there's more propaganda. Wow, that's a lie. I can't believe they're still saying that. We know for a fact that's not true. But, we've got family members that are completely brainwashed and you can't help them.
Yes.
And that's another thing people have to realize. You got a bunch of friends that you care about. You're not going to be able to save them here. They're brainwashed. You're not getting them out of it.
It's amazing.
Pick your friends wisely.
And you're right, stocking up on wood, stocking up on a bit of gold and silver. We've often talked about that on Freedom
100%.
Train International. Being able to trade in even things like that funny one you said on a Freedom Train International show a few weeks ago, big lighters, so you can light fires if you're having to go into the bush and you want to be able to keep warm. Or cigarettes are going to be very good for trading. What can you trade with? Coffee,
cigarettes. There are a lot of things that you might not even use yourself. But what are the basic things? Even water. If you don't have an extra couple of 50-gallon barrels of water around your house, you're going to find yourself in a problem.
Yes,
big time. And so here's the thing: is that people need to get prepared. But more than anything, you get prepared through knowledge, and knowledge comes from watching shows like what you're doing. In my book on the Redneck Conservative, I probably list at least 20 other books that I recommend everybody reads, every last one of them. And the problem is you're going to go through a grief reaction, because the day you realize how much you've been lied to, you're going to sit there one day and go, oh my God, this is not true. I grew up being told in school this was true. And now I know for a fact I was lied to, all through school. And I used, I was a bit of a rabble rouser because I used to question everything, because my mom taught me how to think, not what to think.
Exactly the same. Absolutely. And, Tucker Carlson has just put out an extraordinary piece on Israel, really brave, really true. Listen to some of those leading podcasts. Candace Owen is a really interesting one on Charlie Kirk at the moment. Charlie Kirk's assassination, like the John F. Kennedy assassination, is waking up a lot of people to ask a lot of questions. But I would say to everybody, buy this Redneck Conservative book. And you haven't asked me to do this, and I'm not doing it because you're my friend, Peter. But this is books like this that you can read and get to grips with. Make sure, if you're going out, collect some packets of seeds and try to make them organic seeds that haven't been interfered with by Bill Gates and made to be inert after the one initial grow. And that's why organic seeds are good, because they haven't been sprayed with the horrible treatments that Bill Gates puts on his seeds, so that we are not able to keep replenishing our supplies. I have friends who now collect all their seeds from pumpkins or lemons, and one of them grows full-on vegetable gardens, which she can barter with. So it's not a matter of being scared, Peter. There are a lot of things we can do. If we push back hard for a month or so, we are many, and these government cabal are made up of only a few, and they will collapse if enough of us stand up and say no, will they not? That's my fervent belief.
Well, I believe that they will, Liz, but just remember, it's still who controls the media. And that's why it's so critical for people to turn off mainstream media and start going to alternative sources of media. Here in Canada, we got a great website called theylied.ca. The amount of data on there is just crazy. Even that link you sent me earlier today, Liz, that should be post that link here after the show. I mean, you want to become self-sufficient. That guy's got a ton of data, but even little things, Liz. So like, I can't remember the last time I watched a movie. I don't have time to do any of that stuff. I mean, there's so much to be learned just off YouTube, but remember that you need a lot of stuff in print, because when you're blocked off digitally, you're going to lose access to all that stuff that you think you have at your fingertips now. That can be taken away with you by a government that goes, no, we don't want you. Do you think, for example, in North Korea, people have access to the same information that we have access to?
Absolutely
No.
not. And actually, that's a brilliant idea. If you've got a car that isn't an electric car, which is very wise, you want to print off the manuals for how to repair the car. You want to print off manuals, everything. Yeah. What other manuals would you recommend?
The SAS Survival Handbook. That was the SAS were the most elite military force in the world. They were British. I think the Secret Air or Special Air Services. And they have a survival manual called the SAS Survival Manual. You can take that book and be dropped from a plane and survive anywhere in the world, Liz.
That's brilliant. Right? That's brilliant.
Like,
and what was the website you said before? The website that you said you like to follow?
The one that you just sent to me, that one I watched earlier today. Yes. I just watched this evening, because that guy's highly self-sufficient and he's somewhat autistic. He's the type of autistic people they don't want you knowing about. I mean, there's a man who built all his own 50 pieces of machinery, said you could run mankind with them all. And it's all open source. You know, how do you build a $400,000 house for $40,000? I mean, you can go learn it all right there. So the thing is no matter what you're being told. And the other thing is, you know, we all struggle with this, is try to have no debt. Whatever you need to do to try to get out of debt. And at the same time, if you had money to buy some precious metals, put some money into some precious metals. By the way, we did a show about a month ago, and gold at the time in Canada was $4,953, and now it's over $5,200. It's gone up a couple of $100 just in the last month.
Yeah.
That's gold in Canada. And the same thing with silver. And you should have some silver coins. Gold, I think, what did they say, Liz? Gold is for wealth preservation. Silver is for human preservation.
Yes, it's a very good saying. Do you feel scared, Peter? Do you feel worried? Or do you feel what will be will be? I'm well prepared. I'm a strong person. I'm an independent thinker. I am a man who's willing to defend his family and look after my community. So do you have no fear of them?
I'm a different kind of a duck, Liz. I actually thrive on this stuff. I love what's going on, right? I would love to find myself in a position one day to deal with a bunch of these people personally. Just saying. In a nice, friendly way, of course.
Yeah, in a nice, friendly way, of course. But here's the rub. I believe they've really tried to break down the wonderful interplay of male and female, where the man was the protector of the family, if you like, the head of the family. They've very much tried to break that down. Women's lib, which I was brought up with, you must have a job, you must be independent, you must be financially independent. You know, everybody's completely equal. No, we're different. We are equal, but we're very different, men and women. I think that whole women's lib thing was in the 60s and 70s another psyop to try to break down families. I think they've tried to break down the masculinity of men. And I've always loved working with you, Peter, because you are a real man's man. And you are not going to allow a bunch of bullies and criminals to come in and hurt your family. That's what men need to do. And the women need to back up their men, support them and thank them. And I think we've got so out of whack with our family structure, but it's been done on purpose from the UN, the WEF down. They want broken families, don't they?
Well, they do, Liz. So I would recommend that people go back and watch the movie Braveheart. Go back and watch 300, how Sparta fought off the Persian Empire. Go watch those two movies. And the other most important thing I want to leave people with, Liz, is you have to be careful who you pick for your friends. Because of what happened with COVID, a lot of people that I knew well, I don't spend time around with anymore because I realized they can't be trusted. If I was Anne Frank in Germany, they'd have turned me in already. And we've had neighbors and stuff that would turn you in, and that's without a reward. So pick people for your new friends and people that you can rely on, that if somebody offered them $5,000, they wouldn't turn you in and rat you out. Say, I don't like how Liz Gunn's thinking. I don't like what something she had to say. Well, here's $5,000 reward. I'll give you an example, Liz, here. When they put the climate lockdown here in Nova Scotia, the first thing they put up was a rat line. And the line, you couldn't get through to it was so busy, people calling in on their neighbors. Somebody walked inside the woods somewhere. And same thing with COVID. The government set up rat lines because they knew human beings will do that. And so you have to be really careful who you pick for your friends. And if you had people who didn't back you during COVID, they won't back. You learned a lot about people during COVID. You definitely learned who you can rely on and who you can't rely on. Don't get me wrong. You can still talk to them and they can be your, fair weather friends.
Acquaintances.
They can be your acquaintances, but I'm going to tell you, when your back's against the wall, you can't count on them. And so now you know who you can count on. And those are the people that you want to build relationships going forward. The people that you've learned the hard way, you can count on them. And there's not a lot of them, to tell you the truth. A lot of family of mine are going to get left behind because they can't be trusted. Just saying. And it's sad. But I would rather learn it on COVID, right, than find what if the government plans on whatever their plans are and they start shutting people down in accounts and trying to haul folks away. I would rather learn it then than have to learn it now, because a lot of people are going to be heartbroken when they find out the people that will turn them in.
Just before we came to air, you were telling me a really interesting story about if you had a room full of people and somebody said to them, "What's your price?" Just elaborate on that story, Peter.
So in North America, in the U.S., there's a show called or a group called Veritas, and the gentleman who ran that, his specialty was doing undercover operations, where he'd go in and talk to, they'd have hidden cameras and they'd get people and they'd blow the whistle on corruption and basically anything in North America.
Everyone should follow Project Veritas. And Veritas, of course, meaning truth.
What he was saying to a room of very influential people, he said, if you plan on being a truth teller and you're going to tell the truth, there will be a price. So if you're the type of person who just wants to go along to get along, this is not the game for you. You're the people that can never, ever be trusted, ever. Because what he said is, if you're going to tell the truth, you have to be willing to die to tell the truth. Because other than that, you can be bought. And for example, he said in the room, some people can be bought for 1,000. Some people, it might be 10, 20, 100,000, a million, 10 million, maybe 100 million. If you had a big enough following of people, let's say you can control 80 million people with a text. They might say to you, here's $100 million. We want you to post some of these things, or we want you to just shut up and not say anything about what's happening in Israel, for example. We want you to just shut up and nobody will know and you'll be quiet. But if you're not willing to die to tell the truth, then that means you can be bought. I don't know what your price is yet, but someone somewhere one day will figure out what your price is. And someone figured out what Justin Trudeau's price was. Somebody figured out what Keir Starmer's price was. Someone figured out Mark Carney's price, and someone figured out that person you have in Australia's price.
And someone sure as hell figured out Jacinda Ardern's price she was willing to sell her country for.
Yeah, so there's very few people who don't have a price. But I figured out a long time ago, one day I'm going to be dead. And right now it's sooner than later, because I'm more than halfway through on this road trip that I'm on. Right? So the reality is I'm going to be dead one day anyway. But I will continue to tell the truth till my dying breath. But the reality of it is I can't be bought. And if someone tries to buy me, they probably shouldn't even make that offer to me, because that's not going to end well. Just saying. So the world's full of people like that. But a lot of us, for example, I'm looking at these people that are speaking out what's happening in Israel and Gaza. And when you come out against the people who control the banking system in the world and we're the masters of blackmail, Tucker right now, I would highly recommend that he get a lot better security. And it's the same thing with that other gal,
Candace Owens.
Candace Owens.
But if anything happens to them, it's just going to rebound on Israel so badly. And even though they don't seem to realize how many people no longer trust or like them, Netanyahu's government, the Zionist government, even though many people are waking up to how evil they have been in their behavior and the fact that Netanyahu should be in prison, if they did anything to Tucker or Candace, it would make it so much worse for Israel, for Netanyahu.
So there's another person named Ian Carroll. He's the same way. He's a big TikTok personality.
Yeah, he's very good to follow.
So what happens, Liz, is what people need to understand: the Mossad are the best at what they do in the world, and they'll get rid of anybody and make it look like an accident. They're the best. There's nobody in there's nobody in the CIA that's that good. The Mossad are the best at what they do.
Well, even those names we've mentioned, I heard Candace's latest one, and she does a full statement, and she also quotes Theo Von, a young, a very effective communicator. Actually, he helped Trump get in. Theo Von has done a statement saying he has no intention of suiciding. He has never thought about suicide. He wants to meet a woman. He wants to have a family. He loves watching his friends' families grow up. He has many friends. He's very happy, and he will never even consider suiciding. So Candace Owens did the same statement the other day. In other words, they are now all onto this and saying if the Mossad comes in and tries to do that and point to suicide, we will all have that on tape. So they are hanging themselves now by continuing to cause all this death and mayhem and try to pass it off as suicide. I believe that, Peter. They're very exposed now, the Mossad.
They have no problem in crashing a plane with 300 people on it to kill one person to make it look like an accident, Liz.
Yeah.
Right?
The evil.
Well,
evil of it.
Now you got to remember, it's not people; it's an ideology, right? And there's an ideology. If you go read The Creature from Jekyll Island, it will change your view of the entire world. I thought that I knew quite a bit from the amount of research I did, Liz, but that took me down rabbit holes and it added pieces to the puzzle that I didn't have. And G. Edward Griffin wrote that book, and it's a masterpiece. And then he also did another interview with he did an interview with another guy named Yuri Bezmenov, and everybody should go on YouTube and find that old interview with Yuri Bezmenov. And he was a defector from Russia, and he talked about how communism will eventually take over the United States without a shot being fired. And it's brilliant, and it's very timely. And it fits right in with George Orwell's 1984. So 1984 was written, that's coming true. Basically, that was, that's almost like, oh, what's going to happen next? Well, what does 1984 say is going to happen next? And it'll probably happen. But if you go listen to that interview by Yuri Bezmenov, in an interview with G. Edward Griffin, just brilliant how he lays it out. And then a lot of that was read into the congressional record. And I actually put what was read, those 50 points, in my book, The Redneck Conservative. You can read out what the plan was. And I think out of those, 50 points, probably 45 of them have already come to pass, Liz. Here's how we're going to take down the country without firing a shot. I think 45 out of those 50 things have already come to pass.
Communism is it's as if the UN and the WEF looked around the world and said, what's the most controlling form of government? And the Marxist communist form of government is that. But it's an interesting one, Peter, because it ends up imploding on itself. This much control of human lives, this much silencing of human voices, it will never work. I absolutely know in the long term, and I would hope it would be in the shorter term if enough of us stand up, but it will fall. Eventually it falls on itself, don't you think?
Well, I always go back, Liz, to something that there was a gentleman, he died in a Nazi concentration camp. His name was Bonhoeffer. And Bonhoeffer said that evil people you can predict what they're going to do. But he said you can't predict what stupid people are going to do. And he said stupidity is a lot worse than evil, because stupid people will go along with evil and be the useful idiots. Stalin used to refer to them as the useful idiots. He could get them to do almost anything on behalf of evil. Evil, you can figure it out, and they're predictable. Stupid, they're hard to predict, Liz, and they will do dumb stuff. It's like here in Canada, people going along with this elbows up, not realizing that in hockey, that was the big war cry on our election. Oh, you got to have elbows up and fight back. It's a hockey term. Yeah, but it's a penalty box term. It's fighting dirty. It means that you've got no scruples. It means that you've got no problem elbowing somebody in the head and ruining their career forever. And people thought, well, that's a decent slogan. And they went along with it and voted for Carney. But more than half of Canada went along with a slogan that was designed for stupid people, right? Anybody that could think critically looked at that and said, well, that's kind of a dumb thing to say. And they're going, oh, come on now, elbows up. It's still one of the dumbest things I've ever heard, but they sold it to people. And everybody they looked around and say, what are the other people doing? And the people who understand psychology understand the herd response and how much people want to be a member of a herd. And I'm not a herd member, and neither are you, Liz.
No,
And
I'm
neither are
not.
most of the people watching this show, right? So people are looking around for people that they can follow. Be the person that people want to follow.
Yes.
Don't be the sheep, right? Be the lone wolf. Be a wolf. You don't have to be a lone wolf. Wolves travel in packs. I talk about it in my book, right? And if a lone wolf, if he makes bad mistakes, he ends up dead. But if in the end, sheep, sheep are always looking for a shepherd to help lead them. And someone somewhere's got to stand up and make a stand. And, I'm not saying I'm a shepherd. I'm just one guy. But I wrote that book because I knew one day they'd come to silence me. And they're not going to be able to silence me because what I have, I managed to put in print while I still could.
Well, I really recommend people buy that. You asked earlier if you said I don't have a price, Liz. Well, I think I have a price, and it's this. You could offer me 10 million, 100 million to say what you want me to say, or to not say what you don't want me to say. No, I wouldn't take that. My price is that on my deathbed, I can look myself in the eyes as I leave this body. My soul can turn around and go, you lived well. You actually honored what you believed in. You were true to your soul. Where does your moral code come from? Because, Peter, in working with you, it's a very strong inner moral code. And I think a lot of the young have not been taught this. Certainly in our schools, it's being degraded. I mean, we've had people on FTI, Freedom Train, our shows like Alex Newman, who said, race into school as if the buildings are burning and get your children out of school. They are being corrupted right across the Western education system. But we at home as parents need to teach our children a moral code. So what's yours, Peter?
So it started off, Liz, when I was a little fella. My dad was in the military, and he was a rough, tough military man. And I spent the first 5 years of my life in Germany. Went over there in '58, and it's surprising how much I remember because every weekend we were taken into places and saw what happens when government loses their mind and people get brainwashed and support bad government and lunacy. And then we had pictures of me and all that stuff. And my parents come home, they could never really understand how millions and millions of people bought into that because it wasn't just the Nazis. You got to remember that the whole population of Germany bought into everything that Adolf Hitler was saying. And
So
because of that,
even in 58 and in your childhood, Germany was still being rebuilt after World War II. It was
oh yeah,
still very
because you got to remember, Liz, that was only 13 years later. And I look now, any place that you're at, 13 years. When I was a kid, we used to play hide and seek in bomb craters.
wow.
The road across from where our apartments were, there was still bombed out cars and stuff that hadn't been cleaned up yet. We'd go down these cobblestone roads, and there'd be bullet holes in the side of buildings, and in the trash heaps, there'd still be old military equipment and all kinds of stuff. They'd be emptying. We would go on the weekend. I mean, our parents would take us down where the gypsies were. That Hitler wanted to kill them all. And they'd be draining dikes, and they'd be finding, they'd be finding tanks and armored vehicles and skeletons and all this type of stuff because it was only 13 years later. And it was, my dad had to go to all these concentration camps. So for my whole life, I would hear my father talking about these things. And then he spent a year on the Gaza Strip peacekeeping. And he told me back then, 1963, he was over there. He said they've been killing one another for 1,000 years, Pete. 1,000 years from now, they'll still be killing one another. There's no solution. He said, you better hope that Arabs stay in Arabia and never come to Canada. Because he said there is no solution. That was back then. And so then, I was brought up in a Christian family, and then I was an altar boy I think probably from the time I was 7 till about the time I was 15. And then I was drugged to church every day and had to listen to what was said in a Catholic church every Sunday, 52 weeks a year for an hour. So that was 52 hours of stuff even though I was a kid not paying attention, it still went in here, went into the hard drive and rattled around in there. And we always had hanging on the wall at my place, we always had a framed 10 Commandments. And so I grew up learning the difference between right and wrong. And now kids are not taught the difference between right and wrong. And the government has them so mixed up, they don't know what's right and wrong. And everything is upside down. And I remember we had a psychologist on one of the shows with us, Liz, who talked about where does common sense come from? Common sense basically is biblical principles.
Yes.
Right? You know, I watched footage today of somebody built a house on a beach. And when the water came in, it was washing their beach house away. And the Bible said you probably shouldn't build your house on sand. You know, and I'm looking at all these multi-million-dollar beach homes built on sand. So people have lost their common sense. And where did common sense go? Common sense was something we were taught in church in many cases. It's not being taught anymore. And it's definitively not being taught in school. I fought with teachers my entire life in school. Back then, if they could have put me on Ritalin, they'd have said, MacIsaac's got ADHD and let's put him on Ritalin. Because I questioned them on everything. And the other thing too, Liz, I said my mom taught me to read, taught me to think and not what to think. And she also gave me a set of encyclopedias that I had read to cover by the time I was 6 years old.
Wow.
Literally.
So reading is a key. And I love that,
Yeah.
that your mother taught you how to think, not what to think, not rote learning, but how to critically pull things apart. And you know, probably the greatest of the 10 Commandments, and people can maybe go and get curious and read them and think on them, but probably the greatest one is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. In other words, just treat people the way you want to be treated. If any of these globalist leaders could just apply that, they would stop doing the brutality to the people that they've been doing. Speaking of which, to finish up, I wanted to run past a couple of things in Canada, the ostriches. What's happening there with the ostrich farm? Because at least there we saw a lot of Canadians standing up, as we did in the heroic days of the truckers' convoy when Canada inspired the world. What's happening with that ostrich farm as far as you know, Peter?
As far as I know, as of yesterday, they were still alive, and it's only because of the amount of groundwork that the people are there have done. And as long as the eyes of the world stay on it, they may not kill them. The issue is that right now, Canada's number one police force, the RCMP, they're full of woke tards. From one end to the other, you can't move up through the ranks in the RCMP unless you're fully woke. And there's a lot of overtime, and they're highly paid. And we have enough goons, basically goons, that will do exactly what they're told. And if they're told to go in and kill all these birds, they will do it. And they'll just shrug it off. It's appalling. Those are the same people that would have made excellent guards at the Auschwitz.
They would have. And Andrew Britton said that in the UK, that he understands they're recruiting a specific kind of person for the UK police as well, one who will commit all sorts of atrocities to those people in the RCMP, the UK police, the New Zealand police who are willing to commit atrocities. It'll haunt you. It will haunt you, I promise you. On your deathbed, I've referred to mine, you've got to be at peace on your own deathbed. And if you do wrong now, you won't be. It's very simple, really. The other one is you weren't being allowed to walk in the woods. So a lot of Canadians will be wondering, a lot of people around the world will be wondering how you Canadians there in Nova Scotia are coping with that. Has that been pulled off, I understand, but partially put back on?
So from August 5th until September 18th, you weren't allowed to walk in the woods of Nova Scotia without getting a $28,000 fine.
It's ridiculous.
And there was no exceptions. Didn't matter if it rained, didn't matter. You could walk your dog on a paved road through the woods in the rain and get a $28,000 fine.
And the made-up excuse was climate change or fire risk, or they'll make up any excuse. People need to realize the climate change is a rort, just like the whole COVID thing was a rort. And you have to look into that. We can't spoon feed you on everything, but it's all the same con. And what happened with that, with the walking in the woods then, Peter?
So finally, there was enough pressure put on that after August 18th, they lifted it. And then for a while, they lifted there was a burn ban. You weren't allowed to have fires, cooking fires or anything. And that got lifted, but they put it back on again. And what happened, there was a series of bad decisions made, DEI hirings in the Department of Natural Resources, a series of bad decisions cascaded from putting people in management that were incompetent. And we right now are having the largest forest fire in Nova Scotia that we've had in September in our history. It should have been 2 hectare, about a 3 acre fire. And right now it's around 500 acres because the level of mismanagement and incompetence, Liz, is from a guy who was a professional forest firefighter, is absolutely staggering. It's staggering.
That is heartbreaking. The only positive is the more pain there is, the more of us have to open our eyes fully and wake up and do the research and learn what's really going on, and then become determined to stand up and say no. So the more pain, it seems, more humans finally choose to look at the truth, don't they, Peter?
Yeah, and one of the things when you're looking at the truth, hey, look, go and cancel Netflix. They just put on a show there going after targeting 7-year-olds to make them into transgenders. And Elon Musk said enough's enough. I think they lost $20 billion in market value on one day on Friday.
It's such a joyful story because if we can bring a corrupt company like Netflix to its knees, it shows the people the power that we have. And I think that's what I want to end. Just some positive, there are a lot of dire things. These are in uncertain times. But Peter, as you said earlier, you're loving it. You're eternally optimistic and not toxically optimistic either. You're just practically optimistic. You're prepared. You are willing to share and help others, and we'll keep in touch. Certainly, they better not come after you because we'd get a lot of the eyes of the world on that, I can tell you. But just your advice for people who are feeling a bit shocked, a bit panicked, but determined to take some steps and start to learn what's really going on. What's your final advice, Peter?
Well, if you have to break it down to a couple of things, be very careful of who you pick going forward for your friends, and then realize that there's way more people out there that think like you than you think there are. You got to remember, they told us in Canada they had 90% support on things they did during COVID, and it was a lie. They had less than 45%, but they convinced everybody that you're alone. So you're not alone. As a matter of fact, there's millions and millions of people who think just like you around the world. Now what you have to do is figure out how to find them. And how you find them is start watching alternative media and doing some research and paying attention to people like Liz. Liz is a warrior, and Liz has more warriors on her show all the time. And anybody that invites me to go on, if you're interested in hearing the truth, that's not candy coated, I'm more than willing to come on and offer any help that I can to anybody. So if you want to reach out, you can find me on X at Peter R. MacIsaac. You can see it down below. And anything I can do to help out, I'm more than happy to. But remember, guys, no one's coming to save you. You're going to have to learn how to save yourself. Your family is depending on you to save them. So you better go learn a few things. I mean, like I say, get rid of Netflix, get prepared, and then realize one day you're not going to be here. So what are you going to do with the rest of your life?
I've loved working on Freedom Train International with you, Peter. I mean, it's not just your courage, your outspokenness, your sense of humor, your guts. It is that deep moral code. You're just a delight to talk to, and we will talk again soon. And please, everybody, my last piece of advice is buy Peter's book. We'll put the link underneath this interview, and it's onwards and upwards. The more of us who stand together, the sooner this war will be won. And that's what it comes down to. Stand up, stand together, and say no.
Thanks, Liz. Appreciate the time.